Principal Matters Podcast, episode 402. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. This week, we're going to be talking about building trust with my special guest, Dr. Todd Dain. Dr. Todd Dain has significantly shaped education over a 30-year career, currently leading Shawnee Mission South High School in Overland Park, Kansas since 2015. With a foundation in education from Emporia State and Baker University, he's held roles as a teacher, coach, and administrator. His leadership is acknowledged beyond the school through his involvement in educational organizations and as a former associate principal and activities director at Blue Valley Southwest High School. Dr. Dain's excellence in coaching led to multiple sports victories and district championships. Honored as the 2023 Kansas Principal of the Year, his impact on Kansas education is inspiring. Additionally, he contributes as an adjunct professor at Baker University, and together with his wife, Dr. Jessica Dain, who's superintendent of Piper School District, they are raising 3 children. Dr. Todd Dain, welcome to Principal Matters Podcast. Why don't you fill in the gaps on that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
Yeah, so I'm overwhelmed with humility and very honored to share with you today. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about me here at Shawnee Mission South in Overland Park, Kansas, a suburb of Kansas City, a large high school metropolitan area. I grew up in a small rural town in Kansas and spent most of my childhood on a dairy farm, the youngest of 28 cousins, and for me, the only one with a degree. So my experience as an adolescent growing up in a small town, my role models were my teachers and my coaches and my administrators, and they inspired me to become something different, become something special. And they inspired me that I could do anything and become anything if I worked hard enough for it. And so with that, I decided to go into education and really with the inspiration to give back, just like those educators inspired me to be something more. And so for me, that's kind of a unique spin on who I am. And a lot of folks around this area don't necessarily know that background.
Well, that's such a great way to start this conversation. And I just have to sit here for a minute and think about lessons learned from working on farms. My older brother has a son who spent several years in the Air Force as a survival specialist and then began taking flying lessons and then decided to pursue a career as a pilot. And he was recently applying for some companies, for some transport plane companies. And my older brother told him, he said, "You have a great resume. You've done all this work in the Air Force. You have all this skill." He said, "But put in your resume that you were once a farmer," because of all the work he had done back home. And so he did. And sure enough, when the recruiter from the airlines called him, he said, "There's still some training that we would need to do for you to before you qualified to fly with us, but we saw that you were a farmer." And so, so we know how hardworking farmers are. And so, Todd, I know you probably have a million stories, but I'm sure that's not the first time you thought about how the work that you did on that dairy farm is in some ways prepped you for the work you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly the work ethic was something that was ingrained in me early on. And as the youngest of 28, I was the one that usually followed the bobcat with the shovel in the milk barn. I wasn't old enough to drive the bobcat, but I was the one shoveling the manure. And I was the one that was the youngest in the hay barn, playing the giant Tetris game with stacking the hay bales up top, battling the black wasps and the black snakes up there. So I think I had an appreciation for all of that hard work, but I also knew, man, I wanted to try to do something else.
Yeah, it is a motivation. And I can relate to so many of those memories, being the younger brother of a large family and being that kid too, who had to follow the hay truck through the field and he had to drag the bales in the barn attic. But Todd, I'm going to guarantee that every day when you show up, and sometimes when you're dressed up and you're wearing that tie, that when people come to see you, sometimes they may see the title, but if they can understand the person behind the title, then they realize you're someone just like me. And whether someone's working in a rural setting or suburban setting or urban setting, at the end of the day, we're all someone behind the title. And we all have amazing stories. I want to say at the front of this conversation, congratulations on being the 2023 Kansas Principal of the Year. And you and I have been able to meet through the work with the National Association of Secondary School Principals. So let's take a minute before we talk about that award, because I want to come back to that in a minute. Tell us a little bit more about your school community and some of the achievements you're so proud of that brought you and your school to that kind of recognition.
Well, Shawnee Mission South High School is really an incredible place. It was special before I got here, and I'm just trying to keep it going. Shawnee Mission South was built in 1966, and the Who actually played in our gym in 1967. Incredible stories from alumni with that. But in those 58 years, there have only been 5 principals in the history of this school. And so this is a very special place. I've been here 9 years now, and it's a place where it's a destination building where people come and they don't want to leave because of the wonderful support from the community, our staff, our students. It's really a unique scenario. But we're a large 6A high school in the state of Kansas, 1,600 students. We have a unique diversity and demographic. We have families from the east side of our district that live in $4 million homes in Leawood, Kansas. And then we have families on the other side of the district that are homeless. And we are 33% minority, 30% free and reduced lunch. And it's really a long-standing tradition. If you talk to the students in our school, if you talk to the parents in our community, one of the things that they will always say is that they love our diversity and they appreciate the diversity that we celebrate at Shawnee Mission South. And last year, we were recognized as an Apple Distinguished School, the only Apple Distinguished high school in the state of Kansas. And we have a rich advanced placement tradition here, or advanced placement culture at Shawnee Mission South. Routinely, we have 80 to 90 students that take the AP Calc exam every year. And one of the things with that I'm most proud of is that 22% of our AP students are free and reduced lunch. And so we really try to expand that access to meet the needs of all students and to encourage all students to succeed.
Well, I want to say it for just a little bit longer, because an Apple Distinguished School, you guys have a rich AP tradition. How does a school get nominated for that award? What are some of the things that go into that, Todd, for listeners to understand how that award is given?
So we've been one-to-one Apple devices for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so it's really how we're using those devices to accelerate the learning in the classroom in all curricular areas. So that's one of the things that we had to kind of go through the process with the application and the interview and the site visit just to earn that recognition. And a lot of people in my building did a lot of work to make that happen. But it's something that we were dedicated to, and certainly celebrate the learning that continues with the technology in our school.
Well, you and I have also interacted through the school wellness PD that Jen Schwanke and I were doing with the National Association of Secondary Principals Ignite series. And you were at every single one of those. And every time I'd log in, you always had such great feedback, Todd, for other leaders who were taking the time to think about their own growth. And so I want to sit here for a few minutes too, because you are a veteran principal leading a school that's making significant achievements with its students and its communities. But you're also a principal who's committed to your own self-care. And I'm not saying this to say any of us are perfect, Todd, but I just wanted to sit here for a few minutes because I believe, especially this time of the year, man, it's hard to think about staying motivated to take care of yourself when the work is so demanding. So talk about some of the lessons you've learned in your experience about that balance.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of the things I think that has been most beneficial to me is my dedication to physical exercise. As a former athlete and coach, that kind of falls right in line with my lifestyle, but I exercise every morning, and that's an important part for me mentally and emotionally to kind of navigate my day. And when the rare day that I'm unable to, it's a rough emotional day for me. And so I think that's my time that I try to dedicate each morning. And I also try to navigate that balance with my family, and it's very difficult sometimes. But we try to put family first for my wife, for my kids, and where they are. They're a little older now, and so I've got a little more time than I did when they were all younger and running to and from everywhere. But that's one of the things that I lead with my staff, my team, my staff and my faculty. Family comes first, and that's I try to model that first and foremost. But I also share that message with our staff. And anytime our staff has a family priority, we want them to go, and we help them go. Whether it's me teaching class for them or covering for them, whatever it is, that's an important piece, and that's a balance thing that I didn't have early in my career as a teacher and a coach, coaching 3 sports early on, and having 2 or 3 really little kids at home was really difficult. So I want all of our staff members to value that family thing, the family piece of their professional life. And then I think the other thing that's helped me the most with that balance and that self-care, self-wellness is my ability to delegate. When I first became the principal of a large high school, I tried to attend everything, and I tried to be at everything, and I tried to be everything to everyone. And I learned very quickly, you just can't do that and survive. And so one of the things that I learned from you was the art of being trust willing. And I think a lot of building principals have a difficult time letting go and effectively delegating and being trust willing to trust your team, to trust your teachers, to trust your staff members to help manage all the different things that happen in a large high school.
That's really rich, Todd. I want to just reflect on a couple of things I heard you say. First of all, on your commitment to exercise. And I don't want listeners to ever feel like I'm trying to be prescriptive, but I do want to say that most of the leaders with whom I work that feel like they're able to keep their arms wrapped around their sanity in this work, most of the leaders I know that are committed to that are also committed to fitness and exercise. And I'm not saying that to mean that someone has to do what you do or what I do. I love to run. You may love to work out in the gym, whatever it is that both of us like to do. But um, there's something about that that's such a great stress relief. I also sometimes in the mornings, especially if I can get that workout done early, I step back in and I'm like, I just did probably one of the hardest things I'm going to do all day. And so suddenly there's this feeling like I can do hard things. And so it's a good reminder when you're stepping into that stressful moment later that like, okay, I've already done some hard things today. And also it's just scientifically verified that you're releasing endorphins. It's just a great feeling when your body is moving. And so again, I don't want to say this to put the pressure on anyone that they have to. Movement can come in lots of ways. It can be walking, it can be dancing, it could just be making sure you're getting in your steps that day. But it's such a huge commitment. Anything you want to add to that?
No, we just recently completed a wellness challenge with my team. And so my team, I've got 4 full-time associate principals and an instructional coach. And so the 6 of us, I've got a couple younger members of my team. And so our team was named TD and the Swifties. And we just completed a wellness challenge competition. And so it was a competition every day to see who could rack up the most minutes of exercise. And so there's a little bit of healthy competition, a little positive peer pressure that kind of kept my team going there.
Well, the other things I wanted to say was kudos on your commitment to making sure your family stays a part of the work that you're doing and stays an important part of your own priorities, because at the end of the day, that it always outranks everything else that's going on. And no matter how much, I remember the many, many hours my 4 daughters had to wait outside my office, while I'm finishing meetings. But man, it's also what a time to savor driving home together or going to games together or being able to step into their events because of that school schedule. And so you have to figure out how to leverage those times when you can be together to just make the most of them. One of my favorite memories with my oldest daughter, who now edits the show, she may be listening to this, was just driving to away games together and just being able to just enjoy the culture of the school, but also just be in each other's presence and company. So I know that's important, Todd. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Over 1 million teachers use IXL in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. Why? IXL is where the magic happens. With just one platform, teachers can personalize learning for every student. IXL gives teachers all the tools they need to enhance and differentiate instruction without adding work to their plates. Plus, IXL has decades of expertise and is proven to be effective. Studies on more than 70,000 schools across 45 states show that those who use IXL outperform others on state tests. Ready to bring the magic to your school? Visit IXL.com/PM to learn more. And then the last thing you said that I thought was so powerful too was I love that word you used, being trust willing. I like to think of that analogy of tuck in your cape and stop pretending to be a superhero and ask people for help. Because as skilled and experienced and degreed and responsible as we are, at the end of the day, no leader can do it by himself or herself. Anything you want to add to that before I ask my next question?
Yeah, no, I think that when I see colleagues at other buildings that struggle, a lot of times they struggle because they try to micromanage everything and they try to control everything. And as a principal at a large school, everything comes back on you. And so there is a little level of pressure that you want to get it right, but you've got to be able to handle it from a team approach. Because if you try to do it all, if I tried to do it all, it wouldn't be done right, because I just physically, mentally, emotionally can't do it all every day, all day. And this is an example of this week is an example. It's our winter sweetheart royalty week, and we've got the winter musical going on, all these things going on. So this is a week where I've got 4 night duties this week. It's a busy week. But typically that's unusual, because typically we try to divide and conquer everything. You can't do it all. And if you try to do it all, number one, you're going to burn yourself out. But number two, I think you really damage the opportunity you have to build trust in others and build capacity in your team. And so that's where I think effective delegation and the communication and the follow through and all the pieces with that are so valuable to this role.
Let's talk about because I'm familiar with your work, Todd, I recognize how important relationships are for the bedrock of your leadership with students and teachers and with your community members. So let's talk to that principal for a moment who either may be stepping into this work for the first time, or a veteran leader who just wants to recalibrate their work. Let's sit here for a minute and talk about why building trust is such an important priority to you.
Well, it's foundational to what we do in our world of education. Education is a people business. We're in the people business. Our clients are humans. And so we have to be able to start with relationships, but leverage that trust in all conversations, and all opportunities to connect with our stakeholders and our clients and our staff members all along the way. And it's just foundational to everything that we do. And without it, I think in Lead Like a Pirate, it's the air that we breathe, right? Dave and Beth and that put that together. It's the air that we breathe. Without trust, you just honestly cannot almost function. And so it's just foundational to everything that we do in our schools and as school leaders.
Talk to us for a few minutes about how, because I read a very short summary of your bio, Todd. You've had a lot of experience in addition to what you've done in education leadership in leading teams in sports. And so back up a little bit and tell us about, because everyone's unique experience shapes the way they lead schools. And so, and I know I have a lot of listeners who have either um, been involved in athletics or some have led in other capacities, but talk about how those experiences helped you um, when you did step into school leadership, how you were able to connect the work that you've done with those with team success and the work that you're doing leading a school.
Yeah, I really think it comes down to culture, and culture trumps strategy. And one of the things that we focus on here is that our motto is hashtag culture wins. And I say that, and our kids know it in and out. And sometimes they roll their eyes when I say it to them because they just know that's who I am and that's what we do. And we try to promote our culture in overt and covert ways. But it's really foundational to leading a team of people. And so it starts with your why, right? And as a coach, everyone's got to have that shared vision, that shared mission for your team to be successful. And sometimes you define success in different ways as a coach. And one of the things that I always believed is that success isn't defined today or tomorrow or on the scoreboard. Today is defined 10 years from now when you see young people and the adults that they have become, the fathers that they have become, the husbands that they become, the leaders that they become, the professionals that they become. That's where you define the success. And so when you think about that piece, I always come back with my team, my teachers, our parents, and start with the foundational why. Who are we? Why are we here? And it's all about ensuring success for all kids.
Okay. Success is not defined today. Success is defined 10 years from now. I love that because what I hear you saying, Todd, is that um, this reminds me of a conversation I had with Jen Schwanke, my co-host, who the other day said, when you're confronting situations and conflicts in relationships, sometimes you have to ask yourself the question. She calls it the 4 10s. Is this thing that we're working on right now going to matter in 10 minutes or in 10 days or in 10 months or in 10 years?
Right.
Because sometimes we get worked up over things that that aren't going to matter in 10 years. But we also have to ask ourselves the question, well, what are the things that I am working on that are going to matter? And a lot of times those come back to the qualities that you want to see developed in your character and in your person, and in the people with whom you're working. And that's deeper work. My wife told me the other day, she was remembering her first year when she was a math teacher in a middle school and a veteran teacher on the staff. He'd been teaching for like 25 years, pulled her aside and said, "Hey, I know you're a new teacher. So I just want to tell you on the front end, you're going to be really tempted to sweat the small things." So he said, "So here's my advice. Don't sweat the small things. And here's my second piece of advice. Almost everything that happens here is small things."
Yeah.
And so in other words, he was just trying to let her know, hey, there's a bigger picture of what's getting ready to go on here. And when you're my age, you're going to look back and go, those little things I thought were so important really weren't the things that were that important. What do you want to add to that, Todd?
No, I will tell you this. I learned that right away when my first year coaching, my first year teaching. I had a mentor coach, and I said, "Hey, I need some advice. I want to do well at this." And he said, "Work your tail off and keep your mouth shut." And that's kind of what I did. Head down, and I kept working. But he came back and he said, "Hey, here's what I live by. Don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff."
It
And
really is.
that's a good reminder for me every day because when we're having an event or we're having um, a game or a showcase or whatever we're hosting here at school, I want it to be sharp. I want it to be perfect. I want it to be all those things right. And I try to focus on the details. And sometimes I need to remind myself it's all small stuff.
Well, I also love to talk about the complexities in leadership, Todd, how there's always two sides to the same coin. So on the, and I'm not sure how to apply this analogy, but I'll try. But, on the one side, we have to relax and recognize that not everything that we're doing is going to have long-term implications. And then on the other side of the coin, we have to recognize how important it is to be present, caring, empathetic, courageous, because the way we treat people might impact them for the next 10 years. And so it's both at the same time. And so and it's hard as leaders sometimes to remember which of those two we need to put our focus on. But it's helpful for me to reflect on that. What are some ways that when you talk about delegation and you talk about building teams, I want to get really practical here because I know leaders that I work with often have different strategies for doing this. I'm just curious if I could spend an hour with Todd Dain, looking at your schedule and your calendar. How are some ways you prioritize those parts of your work that matter most to you?
Yeah, and here lately it's been a lot busier than usual with my work with NASSP, and I am the president of USA Kansas. So I've actually spent 3 days last week in Topeka, the state capitol, with the legislative platform, just kind of navigating some of the recent House bills that are happening. And so this is a whole new learning curve for me at that level. And so I've had to prioritize some of those things on the national level and the state level, in front of what I might normally prioritize. But each week, I really spend time with my A team and we navigate that calendar together. It's our calendar. They're all our kids and these are all our events. And we kind of divide and conquer all of the things that we have to accomplish on a weekly basis. And that's a microcosm of the planning that we do in the summer to prepare for the entire year and try to delegate assignments, roles, and duties from that point on. And so everybody kind of has their silo. Everyone knows the roles that they play. I spend a lot of time navigating instructions, details, and follow through with all of those roles with my associates. So I've got an incredible team, but two of my associates are brand new this year. I've got two more associates they're in their second year, and my instructional coach, it's their third year. So it's a fairly new team. And so I've had to learn how to be a better delegator and descriptor and leader up front to detail all those things. So as we kind of go through the process, I can reach out to Mark, my athletic director, and say, Mark, these are the things that you're in charge of. And oh, by the way, here's how you do this. And here's what the expectation is for this piece. And this is how this event is supposed to go. But here's some opportunities to include your ideas and how you can make it better. And so it's really something that I've had to do a better job with as I've had new team members turn over, is do a better job of delegating, disaggregating the roles, but also being very specific on the expectations for how they're supposed to lead that and guide that, and then the follow through.
Mm. So I'm curious, do you do the same thing for how you guys navigate teacher observations and evaluations?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think we had 69 teachers on evaluation this year. And so we divide and conquer all those. I take all the new teachers. I take all of our counselors and social workers and all of the all of my administrative staff. I do all of the appraisals there. So I take the bulk of that, but then I kind of disaggregate that list depending on the type of role that each associate has within the building. So my athletic director is always running around. He's an associate principal as well, but his plate is full with everything that he has to do with our facilities and our building and navigating games. So his list of appraisals is much shorter than everyone else's.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said those things, Todd. And just for the sake of uh, clarity, and uh, I'm not trying to be too repetitive, but the practices that you just described are so incredibly useful. And I'm just going to say back the things that for listeners. Um, One, you planned in the summer for your entire school year, which means you're sitting down and looking at that calendar all the way from August through the end of May or June, depending on when you guys start and stop in Kansas. You're also recognizing the roles and responsibilities, the instructional details, and the follow through that each of your associates and team members needs to be a part of doing those things that we're going to schedule in advance. And then you're identifying the skills and availability that each of them have for the different roles and responsibilities that they're managing moving forward. And as sensible as that sounds, Todd, what I've discovered is there's a lot of leaders who've had to learn that the hard way. Because I know, for instance, when I began in administration, there were a lot of things I intended to do that didn't get placed on the calendar. And therefore, I'm scrambling to try to get them done. And time teaches you that the further out you can map out what's getting ready to come, the better off you are. In fact, even in this work I'm doing now, full time consulting and training and working with school leaders, I already have my calendar built all the way out through the end of 25 because and not completely, but I have my markers built throughout that time because I recognize that I have to do the same thing that I'm asking leaders to do, which is the further out you can plan, the better prepared you're going to be for today.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
yeah, go ahead.
It's a process that you have to go through, and there's always things that are going to come up, and you're going to have to address those. But if you have a plan to start with, it's so much easier to handle those curveballs when they come.
Well, as we wrap up this conversation, first of all, I just want to say, Todd, thank you for your leadership. And I'm having this conversation with you now, right in the middle of a school day. And because so many of my conversations come out later than recorded, people may be hearing this in early summer or midsummer. So think about that as you wrap up this conversation, because I want you to think of if you could sit down with the leader for coffee and just give them a parting word of advice as they think about their own leadership, whether they're ending a year or stepping into a year. What are those parting words of advice that you would offer?
Yeah, so there's so many different things, but I think it just boils down to some simple approaches. And I always believe in relationships first. Relationships first, and that starts with everything that we do. Um, Especially if you're a new principal stepping into that role for the first time, um, the relationships will be the foundation for your culture. And so I think that relationships first is so important. And that comes from listening. So that's one of the things that I constantly come back to my team with. We need to be better listeners. And I'm a high energy guy, and I am on the go, and my secretary makes fun of me because I'm clicking my pen all the time. That's my ADHD functioning. But a lot of times it's so important and so powerful to learn how to listen to students, to staff, to parents, and that listen with empathy and build relationships first. And then the other piece of advice is focus on celebrating the good and celebrating and sharing the joy in your buildings, because it's there. Even on your worst day, there's something great, wonderful happening with young people. And so you have to find the good and celebrate that. And it starts, we spend a lot of time at South talking about our culture and culture wins. And we celebrate it in overt and covert ways. And it's become part of who we are, but it didn't start that way.
Yeah.
We started in an overt manner, a very intentional manner of trying to focus on our culture. And so even when the culture isn't where you want it to be yet, start with that, focus on that, and celebrate it in overt ways.
I love that. Well, Todd Dain, Dr. Todd Dain, thank you so much for the opportunity to let Principal Matters listeners learn from you. How can folks stay connected with you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at Shawnee Mission South High School, and you can reach me via email, todddain@smsd.org. Also follow me on X and Instagram at smsouthtdain. That's SMSOUTHTDAIN. And I'm kind of a social media junkie, so I try to post frequently about the great things that are happening in our school, and that's the easiest way to get a hold of me, and you can direct message me from there if you need to.
Great. Well, Principal Matters listeners, I want you to reach out to Todd, follow him on social media. We'll put those links in the show notes. But Dr. Dain, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters. We'll talk to you again next week. You can find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academies, Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations from my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.